Welcome back to the Level Up and Live podcast, the show that helps business owners design a life they don't grow to hate without sacrificing their health, relationships, or faith. We do that through accountability, clarity, support, guidance, and real community. Today's guest is the heartbeat of one of the most faith-centered hair salons here in Texas. Renee Owen is the co-owner and founder of Solace Salon, a high-end space where creativity, excellence, and Christian-centered leadership come together. With 34 years in the beauty industry, she's not just growing a business, she's mentoring a team and creating a home where people feel seen, served, and inspired. Renee, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean.
You're welcome. Well, Renee, take us back to the beginning. How did Solace Salon and Spa come to life, and what gave you the courage to take that leap of faith?
Well, I started doing hair years ago, obviously 34 years ago, and in a very small town, and you just can't make a living in a small town. So moved away from there and continued to do hair everywhere that I went, and started to have kids. Stayed home for a little while, but you never stop doing hair when you do hair. So you do kitchen hair at that point, and worked with youth kids for a little while in our church, and kind of to get in their world. And did kitchen hair for many years to, I guess, keep my abilities up, my skills up, and also get in their world and spend time with them. And then went back into it when one of my older daughter started into hair herself. And then she did research for me, realizing I never had to go back and take the test when I let my license go. So I had to take the test, but I didn't have to go back to school, which I did not want to go back to school. So I went back and took the test. And then when she started doing hair, I thought, what are we doing? We're paying someone else rent. And I said, we don't need to do that. So when I realized what we were paying someone else rent for, I started doing the math, and we jumped off the deep end and built a huge salon.
Yeah.
And anyway, huge salon comes with huge rent and huge income too, but huge rent. So if you really do the math, then huge rent, huge income, it's all the same. Then if you have small rent and small income, it's still all the same, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
Anyway. So then that's where we are today, is we got rid of the rent, bought our own building. Now we have our own mortgage, and smaller, much smaller.
And what year was this, Renee?
2018 was my first one, and we got up and running right before COVID. And then COVID set us back a little bit, but we continued to hang on. And then in 24, we bought our own building.
Awesome. And so and that leads me into my question, what were some of the earliest challenges that you faced starting a local business here in Montgomery County, especially as a woman entrepreneur in the beauty and wellness industry?
Well, COVID. So when we first started, we did great. We took off like insane. And
Really?
I actually didn't even schedule any kind of interview with Fox News at all. And they showed up at my salon. And
What?
I know. And they showed up and did this whole big spiel on us that we were the salon to go to in the Woodlands. And I had no clue they were even coming. And they came through the doors with these cameras. I'm just going, what is going on? I saw myself on the news. I just didn't, what is this? Anyway, I guess we just had a great name, and they just came to see who we were. And, but they didn't even tell us that they were coming. It was super cool. And then, so we just kind of organically grew ourselves, word of mouth. And then COVID hit, and man, we were slammed shut. That was scary. So
when you faced that challenge, so obviously you had a very out of the gates Fox News, you were exposed in advertising and marketing and the organic growth from your customer, your referrals, and just maybe your community and friends and family, and kind of starting there. But then you what I'm hearing you say is you experienced that explosive growth, and then a matter of 12 to 18 months, COVID hit and they were shutting things down. I'm curious on what you did in those times to overcome those obstacles and challenges. How did you adapt in those moments?
Well, so we didn't get COVID money because the model that we had at the time was booth rental, and so we didn't have any employees. Our employees weren't employees; they were booth rental. So they were tenants, if you will.
Contractors. Yeah.
And so
Mm.
um, we didn't benefit from the COVID money, which was dangerous because, I had to come up with the money myself.
Yeah.
That was brutal. So
Mm.
I gave them grace and I did not charge them for
Wow.
their chairs because they weren't making money, but
Yeah.
neither was I. And so that was very painful for me. But
Yeah.
I wanted to hang. I wanted them to hang on, but I
Yeah.
had to hang on too. So I gave them a couple months with no rent. They didn't have to pay, but we only had to shut down, I believe, 2 weeks
Okay.
legally. I think we had to shut down 2 weeks. As soon as they lifted, we were back open.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
but still, people were still very scared to come back, and it
Yes.
was a good 6 months to 9 months before people were relaxed to come back. And
Wow.
people still, for a good year and a half, they didn't come back full fledged. You know,
Yeah.
the world was
In those,
ugly. They needed
yeah,
us.
exactly. So in those moments, did customers still come in, but they just wore a mask and that was required? And then what did you do for advertising and marketing? Was it still customer referrals at that point?
Um, we've always done word of mouth. I've never done a ton of marketing, just haven't
Yeah.
had to.
Yeah.
At that time I started needing to,
Yeah.
is it started getting a little sparse. And so I did a little bit of things out there, not a lot. Just I've
Yeah.
never had to. And
Mm.
they in Montgomery, we never had a mask mandate. We never had to.
Right.
I did have a basket up front with some masks just out of respect for our clients.
Yeah.
And I had a thing on my mirror. I didn't wear a mask because I'm healthy and I felt like that my body could fight it if I ended up getting it. I felt it was unhealthy for my body to wear a mask, and that was
Yeah.
my choice. But
Sure.
for my clients, if they requested that I wore a mask for their health, I did, just out of
Mm.
respect for them. Or if they
Yeah.
had a parent that lived with them or whatever, I did. And then I asked my um, stylist to do the same for their clients, and they did the same.
Yeah. That's smart. And I love that you say that. And at what point you're in business with your daughters as well, which is so incredible, it's so cool and such an inspiring story because, for me, when I think of family, it's like family business, but I
Mhm.
know it comes with challenges and its own obstacles. What's that dynamic been like for you? And what are the blessings and boundaries that come with mixing that family and business?
Well, in the beginning, it was a little trying. Not bad because they were my tenants, they were my contractors, so they
Okay.
just wrote me a check every month, and I
Yeah.
wasn't their boss, but I'm still the mom. But they were always on time with their rent. They never my both my girls do hair for me at the time, did hair for me for the salon. They worked for themselves behind the chair, but they were their own business behind the chair, but for the salon.
Yeah.
Um, then, whenever I got ready to buy the building, I went to my older daughter and talked to her um, about it and told her. And she said, "Well, if you're going to do that, Mom, I want to go ahead and let you know that I'm ready to do the same thing." And I said, "Whoa, we're going to be competitors. That's not
Yeah.
okay." And
Yeah.
so my younger daughter wasn't with us at the time. I think she was actually working.
Mm.
And we went and I think we got ice cream and we're sitting there talking. And the lady that we were at her ice cream shop was eavesdropping. And she said, "Are you in real estate?" And I said, "No." And so I was throwing out some facts. And she said, "Well," she was listening and she
Yeah.
said, "Girls, what your mom is saying." I had my daughter and then my other daughter's best friend. So she's like my kid too. She said,
Yeah.
"Girls, what your mom is saying is true." And, that had to come from someone else because I'm mom, I'm never
Of
right.
course. Of course. Yeah. Different perspective.
Right. And so, but it was golden because she was um, a business owner, but she was also in real estate and we didn't know this. And she
Ah.
was in commercial real estate. And she said, so then we got to talking and she found out that I owned a salon and she said, "Wait, I think you do my boss's hair," which I did. And so it just came full circle that she was the person that God planted right there for us to hear, for her to hear our conversation and for her to be the one to say this to my daughter. All this happened perfectly. And she said, because my daughter had to hear it from someone else.
Yes.
And when
Yeah.
she said that, then we got outside and I said, "Look," I said, because my daughter wanted to rent. She said, I think just, it's always scary to just jump off and purchase a building. Right. And so
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
wanted that time to rent and get used to it. Like I had that time to rent and get used to it.
Right.
And I said, well, I'm not renting. And I said,
Mm.
I'm done renting. So if we're together on this, we need to purchase. I'm ready to purchase. And anyway, so she said, so when we got outside, I said, your job is to go home and pray that God drops a brick on our heads, that this is what you need, that, you know, he makes it abundantly clear that this is the plan.
Mm.
And
Mm.
she wasn't in her car 10 minutes and she called and she said, let's do this.
Wow.
So she turned around and we went and looked at a couple properties. And within that night, we had decided on the property we have now. So, because I had already started the paperwork on what we have now, but I was going to do it myself.
Yeah.
So then we decided, okay, so do we bully the younger one to go in with us, or do we just take her rental check and, you know, because it's
Yeah.
basically the same price as what they were kind of paying for rent to stay with me,
Yeah.
that, you know, to rent just their chair. It's not much more of what they
Mm.
were paying rent. So anyway,
It
there,
just made sense at that point.
yeah. So that's why we'd be able to bully her into it. And so we did.
I love that. That's a beautiful story. For listeners and audience that are listening to this, you know, we all, whether it's family or maybe it's a close friends, it's very tough. It's very challenging. I know you've experienced that in the last 5 years, but I'm curious in our listeners and audience as well, when you work with that family, because there's that, you know each other, you know, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious on, you know, you found the right people and that's what it sounds like, but are they in the right seats in what they do? Because there's three of y'all and y'all, even though you're the founder, now they're partners. What, how have you overcome, you know, versus, hey, we're mother-daughter relationship versus we're partnership? Is that a conversation? And what does that conversation look like? And what roles do they fill within the business so you don't overstep each other's boundaries?
You know, it's been interesting because I don't think we ever sat down and said, hey, this is your job, this is your job, and this is your job. But
Mm,
we've all just kind of settled into our places and
really? Yeah.
it's worked out great. And I don't remember if it was you or Rick pulled me aside. I think it was Rick one day pulled me aside and said something. I think I had said something in our meeting on Thursday morning.
Yeah.
I think I said something out loud to everybody. And I think Rick pulled me aside and he said, um, maybe you need to tell your girls we need to put on, okay, this is my mom hat today. This, I'm going to say
Mhm.
this. All right, now here's my business hat. And was
Yes.
that you or was that Rick that
That
said
was
it?
Rick. I believe it was
Uh,
Rick. Yeah.
yeah. And, but that really kind of
Great.
opened my eyes. Like, we need to sit down and say that. We need to say, okay, I'm going to talk to you with my mom hat on today. Da 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 da. Okay, this is my business hat because
Yeah.
it is two different people. You have to be two different
Exactly.
people.
Yeah.
And that was golden for me because we do have those times that I think, okay, you have to respect me more than that. But
Yeah.
it's not because we are business owners and we're equal. And
Yeah.
in the business, we're equal. And that's, you know, I have to look at it that way, even though I'm still mom.
Yeah.
So
With that being said, how has your role as a mother evolved as you become that business, you know, you become business partners with your daughters in the last 5 years? How has that role evolved for you as a mom?
it's actually been wonderful because
Hmm.
my girls are, I would say they're ahead of me in some of this, that
Hmm.
they are, part of it is I'm old school and I just don't
Yeah.
want this whole computer garbage. Look, let's write it on paper.
Yeah.
You know, I want it all on paper. I want to be able to see it and touch it and hold it. And
Yes.
they're like, Mom, no, no, look, you know, and so they have really taken over a lot of it, which I'm not
Awesome.
arguing about it because I did it myself for a long time. So
Yes. Yeah.
it's been really nice to see them grow and to see my 22-year-old. Oh my word, she's probably going to hear this and she'll like this, but she has taken over a lot, and it's beautiful to watch this 22-year-old know how to do all this. And you're just
Hmm.
going, who are you? You know, most 22-year-olds are out partying, and she's like putting
Yeah.
numbers down and, you know, researching, and 11 o'clock at night still working, and
Yeah.
it's awesome.
That's entrepreneurship. And what I'm hearing you say, Renee, is you've not only allowed that, but you also have relinquished control. A lot of times, business owners and entrepreneurs, I'm sure you can relate with this, and our audience and listeners can as well. We love, it's our baby. You know, we're
Yeah.
founders, business owners, and we don't want to relinquish control. But what I'm hearing you say is that you're allowing your daughters to, you know, do what it is that they're really good at.
Yes.
and that's digital, and that's some of these things that they're allowing in their business. And look what's happening. You know, you're expanding, you're growing, and doing big things, and you're back here going, you know, proud mama bear, and you know, navigating navigating the ship to a certain degree, and your expertise and what you're really good at. And entrepreneurship isn't easy. And so that's one of the beautiful things that I've learned in my business journey and entrepreneurship is, because I loved control, and still to this day I fight with it. I have to be very intentional with it. My whole goal is to allow these team members, family, friends, whoever I'm doing business with, to do what it is that they're good at,
Mm-hmm.
and then work on empowering them and supporting them wherever I can. And that's what it sounds like you're doing. But it's so hard, and it just takes time. And I think it takes that mindset shift. And it sounds like you've got that dialed in.
It is one of the hardest things for me to do, is to let go, because I'm positive
Yeah.
you're not going to do it right. I'll do it myself.
Yes.
But I'm learning, and
Yeah.
it's hard to let go. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Yeah. Give that faith. Take that. The last couple episodes that I've recorded, man, God has been brought more and more and more into these podcast episodes, and I think it's worth noting that, as well as being able to pray about that and relinquish that control. Because at the end of the day, I feel like I'm a big believer in God's not going to give you anything that you can't handle.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all on this journey together. And so if we're aligned with the bigger picture, the vision of Solace Salon, and where you're headed, and the direction and the mission, and everything's super clear, then that's something to strive towards, versus the here and the now. And I want control of the ship. You know, I used to
Right.
be that way, but that was a miserable place to be. And now it's like, okay, where can I sit back and stay in my lane on what I'm really good at? And I ask the team all the time, I'm like, if I'm overstepping here, please let me know. I want you to challenge me and hold me accountable, because it may look like I have it figured out, but I only know one or two things.
Right. Right. Exactly. Well,
You know?
sometimes I sit back and watch them, and I think, okay, that's not right, but I
Yeah.
don't know what they're doing. So I'm just going to watch. And then I realize that never was right. So I have to step in. And there's been just a
Yeah.
couple little things
Yeah.
that I have had to stop. And it's been more of things like, okay, you can't do it that way. That is not,
Mm,
you can't, okay, this is legal. You can't,
yeah.
this is
Yeah.
what we have to stop this. But this is stuff they shouldn't know, right? They're young.
Yeah.
But there's been only a couple things that we've had to stop. But
Mm,
I've always raised my kids by example. So I'm
yeah.
not going to do what you shouldn't do. And
Yeah.
so I think that in doing that, raising them that way and teaching them along the way, everything is a lesson. That
Yeah.
I feel like everything is out there for a lesson. So I almost feel like, who better to hand it off to
Yeah.
my own kids? It's awesome that they know what I expect. So yeah.
Those standards are there. And then it sounds like they feel empowered as well. And I think that's so important when you're working with a team like that, especially partnerships. It's not only, it's challenging, but they have to also feel empowered too, because they have to take ownership in it. And I think, with our listeners and audience and viewers listening to this, if you have a team member, whether that's 1 or 10 or 15 or 20 plus, you have to have those people in that business that are taking ownership. And what I'm hearing you say is your daughters have taken ownership in these certain areas, but at the same time, there's things that you're really good at, and that you have to kind of draw the line in the sand. And I'm curious, how do you approach that when you see that? Because most business owners, Renee, from my experience, they won't say anything, and they'll just kind of let it like blow up in their face, or blow up in the business face before it's too late. Or they will say something and they'll come across as aggressive, blunt. That was me. I didn't know how to communicate to my team when I saw something that they weren't doing wrong, because we're going to make mistakes. We're human beings.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious with you, how have you found that approach to really, delicately, compassionately do that with your daughters when you see something incorrect?
Well, one of the small things was, they wanted to change our contracts. Well, they started
Mm,
moving things around, and I said, you can change them, but you can't, there's certain things you can't change in a contract because it's written by a lawyer for a reason.
yes.
But there were things they wanted to add. Well, you can add things, but you have to make sure that it still reads a certain way. So we're still protected. And I don't think they realized that it's written by a lawyer, for a reason.
Yeah.
And I don't think they realize that the way that you put words in there for,
Yeah.
They're structured that way for a reason. And they reworded it a couple times, and then then things were missing. And that's when I
Mm,
said, oh, okay, hold on a minute. And we had to redo some of the stuff. And
yeah.
I try not to, I am pretty sharp with my words. That is one of my downfalls. I'm not
Yeah.
great at, I'm trying to soften myself because
Yeah.
I am pretty sharp. I'm very
Same.
straightforward. I
Me too.
think that's a business owner's trait
Yeah.
because we are, we do it. We just get
Yes.
it done, and just, why can't you do it that way? Just get it done. You know,
Yep.
that's kind of our personalities. Just get it
Yes.
done.
Yep.
And so we're just straightforward.
Yeah.
And sometimes not everybody's that way.
Yeah.
You know, not everybody's just to the point and just get it done. And I'm pretty harsh like that. So I have to
Same.
soften.
I resonate with you so much, and it's a work in progress, and we're humans, and we recognize that. Here recently in our mastermind group on Fridays, the Level Up and Live, one of a new business owner just I think he's on his second week in his free trial, and he owns a Inferno Customs here locally in Montgomery County. Anyways, guy comes in and just, is sitting there soaking everything up like a sponge and asking good questions, sharing, being vulnerable. And one of the things that he had shared in the group, I had immediately done what you had just said. I had asked some questions, and then I could feel my passion, coming up, kind of like the what you shared about the lingo and the language. You're like, whoa, that's not right, and you immediately just kind of speak out. And I found myself doing that. And when this guy said this and what he was going through with his team, I had immediately said, "You can't do that."
Mhm.
And I felt myself. I'm like, whoa, where did that come from?
Aggression.
Exactly. And afterwards, Renee, I have learned in the past, I'm like, man, I wouldn't have said anything to anybody. I would have just isolated, and, it could have ruined relationships over time. But I did two things that made a huge difference. I feel like in me becoming the leader that I want to become is, one, I collaborated with three other business owners that were sitting at the table. And I asked them when he wasn't there, I said, hey, was this message received when I said it like this? And they looked at me and smiled. They're like, we glad you asked. And they said, you came across a little assertive and aggressive. However, the point was made and we agree with you, but maybe you could have done it a little differently. And so we reflected on that. We collaborated on that. And it was such a breath of fresh air hearing that from them. So you know what I did? 30 minutes later, I called the business owner and I said, hey, I want to get your feedback. How was that message received, the way being on the other side of the table and me saying that? And he goes, no, I got a strong backbone, just like what you said, business owner, I can handle this kind of stuff, and he kind of went into his story. But immediately for me, it was an indicator, like he was just trying to be strong, in that moment. And so we talked for 5 or 10 minutes, and I said, here's the reason why I'm calling you, is because I don't like the way I came across in that mastermind group. I don't like the way I talked to you.
Mm-hmm.
And after collaborating with other business owners in the group, I feel like I could have done this differently and approached that in a different manner, and the way I asked you that after asking you that question. And he goes, agreed.
Huh.
And I knew right then and there, I was like, I'm so grateful that I did those two things. Yeah, it took me an extra 30 minutes to an hour and I had to go out of my way to do that. But I learned as a leader, because like you said, man, we get in those moments where we're like, we know because we've been doing it for so long, and then our words are so powerful. Sometimes, man, that can really come back and be a compounding, and it could either be a good thing or a bad thing. And in my case, it's always been a freaking bad thing, Any thoughts on that?
Yes, I feel like, as far as having employees, I feel like you can scare them off
Yeah.
really easy because
Yeah.
they go, "Whoa, you're not nice."
Yeah.
But and with today's people, look, you got to coddle them, and
Yeah.
that's rough. I'm not a coddler,
Yeah.
and I think that's why my kids are tough. I didn't
Yes.
coddle them, and
Yeah.
that's why they're business owners and very successful, because I
Yeah.
didn't coddle them. And
Mm.
that's but the strong thing that I think we have is, my younger daughter is excellent at wording. So
Mm.
whenever I have an employee that you got to coddle, I call her, or I'll shoot her a text and say, reword this, please. And she'll reword it perfectly. And
Yeah.
then my older daughter is right in between us. She's
Oh,
a little bit more like me, but a little bit more like Kylie. And
yeah.
so Lindsay's more like, okay, well, we got
Mm.
to toughen it up just a little bit, or,
Yeah.
Kylie's really on the sweeter side, and Lindsay's I'm not nice, and Lindsay's like right in the middle. So we're all good. So yeah.
Good cop, bad cop. And that's beautiful that you know that. And I think there's wisdom in that and what you just shared. And for our listeners and audience, if you're a business owner and you have one employee, or maybe you don't, you're self-employed, when you experience those bad times, because we all will, customers, family, friends, who are you, knowing oneself, self-awareness, what you just said, Renee, is, you know what, I'm not nice when it comes to this, and maybe triggered just like I am. So who may be able to approach this in a better manner. And I think that's so powerful, and it's so so wise. In what I've learned in my experience is let's delegate this, because I'm going to stay in my strengths over here. I'm going to be the driver, the ambition, look at things at 30,000 feet. I'm going to let this person do this, because the opposite of our strengths, for me, a weakness of mine, I call it a weakness, it's a vulnerability, is empathy. If you look at scale of 1 to 32 on the Strengths 2.0 Finder, highly recommend any business owner, emerging leader out there to take the Strengths 2.0 Finder. It's on Amazon. It's like $20. I'm not affiliated with them, but when I took it, I found out my top 5 strengths and my bottom five strengths is what I call them. And that one, the one at the very bottom is empathy and compassion. So I've had to be really intentional, because I need to be able to pull that in my tool belt. But here's the thing, Renee, if I'm doing that 24/7, I'm not staying in my strength zone. So I don't sit there, and I'm not an empathetic person 24/7. I would not be good in customer service all day long. So I have to eliminate and remove myself in that part of the business to delegate that to somebody that is in their strengths, and that's empathy and compassion. And that's what it sounds like you have done, obviously, with your partners is, hey, this is my strengths. I'm going to stay in this lane. Over here, you're really good at this, and I'm going to allow you to go do this. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I think so. I mean, confrontation's not easy for me, because I am pretty harsh, and you're probably going to hate me when we're done. But
Never.
Kylie's super sweet. She's really sweet, and you'll like her. Like, did she just get on to me? That was so nice. I don't know. But she's really sweet. But you're going to look at me and go, man, you hate me. But I said exactly what I should have said,
Yeah.
the way that I feel like I would have thought, if you said to me what I said to you, I would go, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
I should have done it this way.
Yep.
I don't know, to me, I think I don't get it. But to them, they're going, oh, wow, she just slapped me across,
Yeah. Yeah.
I just, so
Yeah. I resonate with
everybody's
what you're.
different.
Well, it's like you said earlier, it's like when you have employees and team members, contractors, or even anybody that you're doing business with, me and you can have a conversation all day long, and I shoot you straight because there's some kind of credibility or respect. You're like, oh, this guy goes to the same meeting. We did a podcast together. So there's some kind of relationship there. And I say something, you're like, okay, yeah, you take it with a grain of salt. But then you tell somebody on the opposite spectrum, like with what you're saying, they're like, whoa, that was a ton of bricks thrown at me. That was intensive. And what I've learned in leadership is, and this has been one of the hardest things that I've learned, Renee, that I'm still learning to this day, a student of the game, is whoever I'm talking to, it could be a team member, customer, even somebody on the podcast or in the mastermind group, I have to put myself where they are. I have to meet them where they are. And that is when I'm so intentional about that. Is like, where are they are in their temperament, their personality. And of course, that just takes time, asking good questions, because I used to be the leader and the business owner that would just say what was on my mind. And I would wonder why they would never want to go to lunch with me or coffee with me or hang out or build relationships with me,
Why don't they
It's no wonder.
Yeah.
So, but I resonate, and I know a lot of our listeners and audience as well. A lot of our people in our community are driven individuals like mine and yourself, and that's iron sharpens iron, and that's how you really grow. I actually made a post about this yesterday on my social media. I said, look, real growth isn't being nice; it's being real. It's being authentic, because you care about that person. And when me and you speak in our personalities, it's because we're coming from love. We're coming from that is the way we speak. That's our language. But to the other person, that's the opposite of us. They don't receive it that way.
Right.
And that's what I've learned. And so it's been an awesome journey. But I'm curious with you, we've already talked about entrepreneurship not being easy, not being for the faint of heart. And here you are today. Can you share a season where in your life that things felt heavy, maybe even uncertain, or even if like it wasn't going to work out, and you're like, man, I'm just going to go back to doing what I did before starting the salon? And how did you push through that in that uncertainty?
Yes, I will. A while back, I had I had a full salon. At one point, I had 24 stylists,
Oh, wow.
and I had 11 leave in 2 weeks,
Wow.
and that's brutal on my
Yeah.
pocketbook, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of brutal on your heart too. You know, you feel it's very personal at that point.
Yeah.
Um, and it was personal at that point. Plus, I was out of town, and I
Oh
was out
my
of
God.
town for my aunt's 80th birthday, and I wasn't coming home. I was staying a few days, and my whole family was out of town. Both my girls were with me, so nobody was at the salon to watch it.
Oh,
Um,
dang.
and I just had to leave. There was no way. I mean, I had cameras, and I was watching. I was
Yeah.
watching them walk out, and it was brutal. But there's nothing I could do. I didn't enjoy my vacation. I was sick. I was literally throwing up. Literally.
Wow.
I mean, you
Yeah.
can't not, right? You're
No,
sick,
absolutely not.
and it was brutal. But you know, while you think it's a tragedy, and while you think you're going to die, and it's just horrible, it was a huge blessing. Huge
Mm,
blessing. There was a lot of gossip and a lot of garbage, but I was not in control
mm,
because my bills were high and
yeah.
I needed them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted probably 9 of them out of 11 gone already, and they were already on my list to weed out,
Mm,
eventually fire as time went, because there were a bunch of gossips. And
mm.
gossip will tear a salon down in days,
Very
hours.
cancerous. Yes.
Horrible, horrible.
Yeah.
And I had fired one of them, and she just made a huge ruckus and took them
Mm.
all with her. I had no idea that was a huge blessing, and I had no idea they had worked on it for 2 years. They had been
Wow.
building this
Really?
for 2 years.
Oh.
And
Your daughters were in the business at this time?
yes,
Okay.
yes, and
Mm,
but there was uh, one of the girls had a leaky mouth, and I heard a whole bunch of stuff, and
mm,
so it just it does it takes a toll on your heart because
yeah,
you think
for
these
sure.
people are friends.
Yeah.
I thought a couple of them were friends, not all of them.
Yeah.
Anyway, comes a full circle, and you realize God's blessing,
Mm,
because all 11 that left turned out to be part of the problem,
mm.
and I wasn't strong enough. God knew my strength, and I was not strong enough to let them go when I knew that I needed them to pay my bills.
Yes. Yes.
And
Mm.
God had a bigger plan,
Yep.
and man, he just cut me off at the knees, but he
Wow.
knew I couldn't do it.
Yep.
And when he made that cut, and then things started falling into place.
Wow.
And it
Mm.
but I couldn't have done it myself. I could not have done it myself, because it took me a couple months to
Yeah.
fill it back up again. And then
Yeah.
when I filled it back up again, and they weren't the right people either, because I was desperate, right? I was just taking
Yes.
anybody.
Yep.
So I got people in, and then like, okay, you're not right, you got to go. What am I doing? What am I doing? You got to go. And so went back, got it kind of back to a skeleton crew again, and then just started. And then
Mm.
I just said, you know what, my lease is almost up. Let me just ride this out. And I wrote it out, and then we bought the building, and now we're in control. Our bills are where they need to be, and we don't need anybody with us. The three of us can run it. We don't need anybody. We want people with us. So now it's our choice. And
Yeah.
now if we don't like your shirt, we can fire you. And
Yeah.
that's wonderful. That's a great feeling. And so now our motto is one gossip, one thing said wrong
Mm.
that comes out as gossip, and it's first offense, you're out.
Yes.
No, so we
Wow.
don't mess around with that at all. First offense on gossip, you're out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's so powerful, man. The story that you just shared, what I'm hearing you say is pushing through that. You not only leaned on God and your faith and your creator, because it's all in his timing, and he's not going to give us anything that we can't handle without him. And we know that's why he does that. I feel like, in my belief, it's like these things happen in our life. And in your case, it was this business where you the knees were cut out from underneath you. 11 people, 11 ladies left. And it's like in that moment, you're like, okay, God's testing you. Who are you going to lean on? Is it going to be Renee? Is it going to be me? And you
I
leaned on
know.
God, and look what's happened. It's been a catalyst and a turning point from what I'm hearing you say. And now you're all aligned with your daughters and your partnership and everybody that comes on to your hair salon, where you are aligned with your values, your interest, and you're talking about the bigger pictures, because ain't nobody got time for gossiping. Ain't nobody got
Mhm.
time for it. You can do that outside of it, you know?
Right. Right.
And for me, that's where it seemed like that mindset shifted for you, is really aligning that and making sure that the standards are just that, and upholding that up front. Well, and that's very powerful. And just for our listeners and audience listening to that as well, it's like when you go through these tough times, and it's not if but when, the more and more you scale, the more and more you grow, you're going to face these times, and it's what you do in those moments. And the beautiful thing about it is, Renee, what you inspire me is that you share that you are a woman of God, and that's prayer, and that's faith, that's collaborating with your daughters, and being able to lean on somebody higher than ourselves. Because if we just leaned on it ourselves, then you're back in square one. You're doing the same thing that happened with 11 ladies that left, right?
Right.
So you allowed him into your life to change you.
Yeah. Thank you. It was
Yeah.
so many times I would go home, just all the way home, just praying, God, what do I do? What do I do?
Yeah.
I can't stand this anymore.
Mm.
They're arguing in the back. I would walk in and they would just be quiet because they're talking smack about someone,
Yes.
maybe me, maybe someone else, maybe my daughters. I don't know. But I just knew that I can't pay the bills without them.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
hard. And I mean, I could because I've got a savings, but you don't want
Yeah.
to, right? That's
Yeah,
not
for sure.
business.
Yeah.
And but he did, and when he did, he knocked me to my knees, and that's what I needed. So it's
Renee,
perfect.
do you think we have to, emerging leaders and business owners listening to this, a lot of times what I have found is that we all have to go through this pain cave. And that's not just business, but other areas of life. Maybe it's marriage, maybe it's health and wellness, maybe that's spirituality, business. Do you feel like, from your experience, that we all have to go through that pain, like what you experienced in your business, to really go, okay, you know what? I can't do it alone. I have got to seek counsel. I've got to seek mentorship to steer the ship. Do you have to go through that pain, or can it be caught before we go through that pain cave?
I mean, I feel like, yes, I feel like, because I feel like if you don't, you're not finished. I feel like a true entrepreneur, like if you're, I feel like you're going to start a business, then you're going to go bigger and bigger and bigger until you hit that pain, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
a real driven person is going to keep going until, okay, now this is it, right?
yeah.
Don't you feel like that? I feel like you're going to keep pushing until, all right, now this is as large as I can go, or whatever. Like you're going to keep pushing because you want the most you can get, right?
Yeah, and what I
Until
mean
you
by
can't
that,
take anymore, and then God pushes you back and says, "Whoa, hold on, you need me."
exactly. Yeah, no, I agree. You can, because at the end of the day, what you're implying and what you're saying is, what I'm hearing you say is that I'm making it about Sean. You're making it about Renee. It's like, I want to hit this goal. I want to hit this outcome.
Mhm.
And it's all about me, 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 me. But when you have that servant leader, giving it to the Lord, praying about it, going, God, steer me in the right direction, you're getting outside of oneself, and you're in that Holy Spirit, that child of God is working through you to get to where you want to go. And God obviously is the ultimate. But when I say pain, it's like, okay, think about your health and neglecting. I was 30 pounds overweight. I was 225, 6 foot. I was overweight, but I was neglecting it because I was in the pride and ego of driving the business. I wanted cash flow. I wanted money. I wanted the house. I wanted the cars. So I neglected my weight. I neglected my marriage, and I neglected my friendships because I made it all about me. So I had to go through that pain to finally say in 2021, my gosh, why am I miserable? Why am I unhappy? Well, because all these things started adding up. I made it just about me. But before that, if you're somebody listening to this podcast, Renee, if the Renee in their 20s was listening to this and they're hearing me and you talk right now about the different things that we've talked about, the Lord, praying, God, going through the pain cave, that version of me is going, okay, so, that's great for you guys. I'm glad y'all went through this. I'm going to go back over here and making money, because they haven't been through the pain cave. They haven't had the doctor visit where they said, hey, you're 50 pounds overweight and you're borderline obesity and you're going to end up pre-diabetic. All these different, right? It's like, oh, wow, this is, I'm in the pain cave. Like, if I don't do something, I've got to change and
Yeah.
get outside of myself. That's what I mean by the pain cave. And what I have found is people have to go through that to go, okay, you know what? I'm going to listen to somebody like Renee. I'm going to
Yes.
listen to that podcast. What do I need to do? I'm going to ask better questions. I'm going to get curious. I'm going to plug myself into a community and seek help, seek guidance. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, smart people learn from other people's mistakes, right?
Yes.
And I'm not always that smart. So looking at other people's businesses. Like if I would have really studied other businesses and studied other people, how they got there or whatever,
Yes.
maybe I would have learned on their mistakes and not jumped off head first and opened my first salon with 24 chairs. I mean, maybe that'd have been a start.
Yeah, but
But
would you been able to do that if you didn't already go and start your own entrepreneur
right.
journey?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't have known that was huge. I wouldn't have known that that's so much work. I wouldn't have known, but I
Exactly.
should have known because I should have checked it.
Yep.
There's
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
so I don't know, but I don't do that. I jump
Yeah.
off head first.
Yep. Yeah, I'm the same way. And it's like, okay, you can have the blueprint of life on this
Mhm.
podcast, everything, all the advice that you have shared today and your story and your vulnerabilities. What's going to happen is, my hope, my belief is to empower that person to kind of use their life, steer it as GPS in their own life before they hit that pain cave, before going through, you know what, I'm going to learn from Renee's mistakes. I'm going to learn from Sean's mistakes, and I'm going to go get grounded in this. That's my hope. But from my experience is that ain't the case. The case is they have to do what me and you have done. We're
Right.
going to go experience it for ourselves.
Hard headed. Yeah.
Yep, hard headed. Exactly. Pride and ego and
Yeah.
just being a human being. So.
Right. Exactly.
Well, as we wrap things up, I wanted to ask you before we ask you how our community can support you is, what do you want your daughters and your clients to remember about the way you led Solace Salon and Spa?
Christ-like, first of all, integrity. That we are who we say we are.
Love that.
That's the main thing. Integrity is huge with me. That you get what you came for. You get what we said we were giving you. Who we are.
Love that. And for our listeners who are in the trenches right now in business ownership, what would you say to encourage them so they don't feel like giving up? Because we both know it's not for the faint of heart. And yes, we have strong personalities, and it's not for people that are lacking resilience or persistence in surrounding themselves with individuals like yourself. But what would you say that one thing to encourage them so they don't feel like giving up?
The one thing, I mean, start over. Just keep trying and trying. It's not, business is not easy.
No.
It is not. You don't start a business so you have free time. That is not the reason you start a business. That's a joke.
Yeah.
So you don't, I read the other day that, or a while back, that you don't, what was it? You don't get to pick something about, you don't work 18 hours. You get to pick the 18 hours a day you work or something. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but just keep trying and keep trying, because it
Yeah.
will eventually work. You just have to keep trying and keep
Yeah.
trying and just keep getting back up again.
Keep showing up, because and also I think I heard you say it earlier, is tying the why. Why are you getting into this? And I failed many times on my why. My why was money. And yeah, sure, it may work in your 20s and 30s and maybe even in your 40s and 50s, but we both know I know what that leads to. That leads to just, it's not sustainable, and it's not a big enough why that it's I'm not emotionally connected to it. And
Right.
that's not success to me, and that changes over time. And I know a lot of our listeners and business owners that are listening to this, I always try to leave them with that. When you're not going to give up, whether it's an endurance race, a marathon, a business, if you have that strong why do you want your business to work out? Why do you want to leave a legacy? Why do you want to be, what do you want to be known for? And so you start answering these questions, what I've learned is, being a student in the game, is that it ties my emotions to those questions. And then when times get tough, like me and you've talked about today on today's podcast, you're like, oh, this is just a little speed bump versus the end of the world. And that's what's really helped me out along the way. So, Renee, thank you for sharing your journey so honestly today. See, it wasn't this bad. You did awesome today. It
wasn't hard at all.
Exactly. Yeah. You're a rock star. Well, I really appreciate you being on the podcast today and saying yes. With that being said, how can our Level Up and Live community, how can we support you in today's podcast?
Prayer, first of all. Just pray for us that that we just keep moving along like we are.
Yeah.
Our new location has been great. Pray for us to be able to, we have a couple chairs left we have to fill with good girls or good stylists. Doesn't have to be female,
Yeah.
but great stylists. And we do have high standards, high standards for stylist ability, but also integrity. And I'm huge
Yes.
on that. We're very picky. We're not just taking anyone. So
Yes.
we're keeping our standards high. So I've got a couple that I'm interviewing. So just pray for our whatever that word I'm thinking of is that. Pray
Process.
for our, yes, pray for
Yeah.
the process of interviews. So
Absolutely. Well, and then also too, where's your storefront? Where's your salon at?
it is right. It's almost at the corner. It's across from Sonic on 105
Okay.
and McCaleb.
Okay.
Right at that
Well,
corner, right
yeah.
behind Rudy's Barbecue.
Okay.
There's that little business park.
Yep.
Yep, right there.
Awesome. Wes,
Mhm.
there you go. So if you're listening to this and you're wanting to find a new salon, a spa,
Mhm.
reach out to Renee. Make sure you go and check them out. Give them a follow. Make sure you pray for them and stay in touch. This is a lady that is not to be reckoned with, and you want to definitely team up with and go alongside with and support. So, and then also too, if you're interested in getting a new position, I feel like I have a lot of friends in my community and network that are hairstylists. So if you want to go work for somebody that has high standards, which if you're listening to this podcast on the Level Up and Live, I know you've got higher standards, then reach out to Renee. I'm sure you're on socials and your website. And outside of that, Renee, thank you for sharing your journey. Your story is proof that leadership isn't just about having it all figured out. It's about staying faithful, showing up, and building something that outlives you. And if you're listening and you're ready to build your business and your life with intention, this is your community. Keep leveling up and living with purpose. Thanks again, Renee.
Thank you, Sean.